Well, I should probably first of all tell you who I am. I'm the Member of Parliament for the Cotswolds. In the Cotswolds, I'm delighted to say we have more Basque members than any other constituency. So I come from the heart of shooting. So not only do I come from the heart of shooting, I chair the all-party Shooting and Conservation Group, of which Basque is my secretariat. And I think there's hardly a day goes by where I'm not doing something for shooting. And there's a whole array of things going on for shooting at the moment. I tell you, the antis never stop. The antis will never, ever stop. So it needs people like me, it needs people like Basque to constantly be vigilant as to what they're up to. And Charlie, you very kindly asked me to introduce GL43, and that is the issue that's affecting shooting at the moment, although there are others. We might want to come on to the consultation, but GL43, up till now, there has been a general license which allows shoots to release game birds everywhere. And the government, in the name of avian influenza, have introduced a provision that on sites of special interest, you have, if you're a shoot, to now get a license, an individual license. Now, you might think, well, that's a fairly minor thing. But I come from Norfolk, and on the whole of the battle area, and all the shoots around the battle area, they've all been asked to get a license. That's 100,000 acres, and many of those shoots are being told, because I've had a case the other day, that they're not allowed to release game birds until the 1st of October. That shows how little Natural England and the government understand about shooting.
This is your party that's running this government.
Correct.
And you have to go into battle against them.
And I have been in battle against them for months. But I have tried and tried. I've had promises from everybody, and I'm not going to tell you who, that this will be sorted, and it hasn't been sorted.
Not just, as I understand it, that they have mucked it up, but that they have not consulted with anybody in shooting about this. I mean, there are so many areas on which you can hold them to account. Where do you start?
So this is why I'm so furious about all of this. You and I and the whole of the audience of shooting people know that you order your birds, if you're going to put them down on shoot, the previous November and December for release in June. So they could have consulted the shooting community last November, last December about all of this, but they didn't. And what's more, not only did they not consult, they never consulted. And they never talked to the shooting community, all these shoots, and they suddenly introduced it at far too late in the day at the end of April. And that's when everybody had ordered their shoots. The birds were going to arrive within the next month. The birds have now arrived on some of these shoots, and some of these shoots who've been told they can't release until the 1st of October are now in a terrible muddle. And what's more, there's a terrific animal welfare problem, because what are they going to do with these birds?
Now, you must speak to them a lot at DEFRA. I've got Therese Coffey on this stage on Sunday. What should I be saying to her on this issue? How do I put her on the spot?
You say to her, how could this issue have got into such a mess? Because what's actually happening is that now some shoots are having to close down. I have literally, I made a speech in the House of Commons last week where shoots are closing down, gamekeepers are being made redundant. The birds, what are they going to do with the birds? This is a catastrophic situation for some shoots. Ask her why this whole thing has got into such a muddle and what she can do to sort it out.
Well, it's the what she could do to sort it out I'm interested in. I mean, it worries me that we're always left with this kind of sigh of discontent whenever they make a decision like this. Can we come on to outcomes in a minute? Can we just take a step back on general licences? This particular one has only been in place for a few years, hasn't it? 2 years, I think, is that right?
Well, at least that. At least, I think, 2 years.
So it's a relatively new idea that we were licensed anything to do with game birds. The general license was set up for pest species originally, pigeons and crows.
Indeed, and we had all this about 4 years ago with the general pest species, and Michael Gove brought it back in-house and then re-granted the general license, and that is exactly what could have happened here. Therese Coffey, you could ask her why she didn't bring it back into DEFRA and reissue it for everybody on a general license basis. That's what you could have done.
Seems to be something like mission creep with general licenses. I mean, in Scotland, they now cover mammals as well as birds. If you go back to the early 1990s when general licenses came in as a response to the EC Birds Directive, and we had perfectly good wildlife laws, why have we adopted these laws from Europe and why have we not resolved to get rid of them?
Well, what we should have done, of course, is repeal the European legislation, which we haven't done. But to get round it, as you say, we issued these general licenses, which were then open to challenge on individual cases. And of course, what the antis have done is they've pressurised DEFRA into having to grant licenses on these special protection areas because of the excuse of avian flu. And we shouldn't get away from avian flu. There has never been a case where game birds have been put down anywhere that have caused avian flu. So they're issuing these licenses on a wholly fallacious basis. There's no reason to cancel the general license and cause all this problem.
So outcomes, what can we look forward to the government? Are they going to climb down on this one?
I don't think they're going to climb down. Well, bearing in mind at the moment there are 2 court cases pending. BASC has taken them to judicial review on the process.
That's pretty serious, isn't it?
And it's pretty serious stuff when a shooting organisation has to put their hand in their pocket, because it's not cheap to do that. But on the other hand, Wild Justice has also put a judicial review on the opposite case. So this whole thing will now end up in court and the judges will make the decision. But the last case that went to judicial review, BASC won. So we are relatively hopeful that we'll get a good outcome on this.
Is Trey's going to wriggle and say, I can't say anything because of the judicial reviews? Is she going to try that one on me?
She might, but she shouldn't try it on you because it hasn't yet gone to court. And so, therefore, she is free to speak out, and it should never have got to that place. A government shouldn't. I mean, to be honest, I'm a Conservative MP, but I'm going to say on this instance, it's incompetence to have got to this stage.
There's a feeling that DEFRA is at worst, there's a revolving door between the staff at DEFRA. I don't want you to criticise civil servants particularly, but that they will go on to jobs in the conservation industry, and that it works very well for those officials to make this work for their future paymasters. Is that an accurate perception? And this is what a game fair audience might say.
No, I think this originates from National England. It's Marion Spain, the chairman, and Tony Juniper, the chief executive, have both made anti-shooting comments in the past, and I think it's their way of, one by one, putting more and more blocks onto shooting to try and reduce or eliminate shooting. And I think that's why we've got to be very wary of National England.
Well, I think it's fair to say that National England does come across as extremely anti-shooting. It does not seem to accept that shooting does good for wildlife.
And the problem and to be honest, I don't want you to criticise the staff at DEFRA, because it's not the staff at DEFRA's fault, but the ministers have not been strong enough at standing up to the advice from National England. That's where the real fault lies.
So in that, I mean, you know how ministries work. So in that situation, Therese Coffey might be given this as a possible decision she could make, and then she simply doesn't question it and goes ahead and makes it. And I mean, are we in a position now where she should be embarrassed by this?
Well, of course she should be embarrassed, but she'll tell you anything on Sunday, because she'll simply say, well, this is now a matter for the courts. They will decide. I'm sure she's embarrassed, but it's probably too late for that now.
Okay, right. I mean, I'm sure she'll highlight
well, what we
that.
need to do, of course, the most important thing is, whilst it's causing a problem this year, we want to make absolutely sure, one way or another, through the courts or through the government or whatever, that it's sorted out for next year, because we don't want this mess occurring for the second season in a row.
There's a rumour that number 10 wants them to repeal GL 43, or actually reinstate GL 43. That's what I mean. Yeah, so that you can now release game birds on European protected areas. There is a rumour that number 10 wants it, and it is only DEFRA that's blocking it.
Well, I have to be very careful what I say here, but you can assume that I've talked to the Prime Minister about this matter.
Good. That's very good to hear. And that with an election not terribly far away, it looks like DEFRA is the department for losing the royal vote at the moment. That must be a problem even for you.
It is a problem for us, and I think they need to come up with a strategy, both not only in shooting, which this is terrible for, and BASC has 150,000 members, many of whom I think probably do vote Conservative. So it is a problem, but also on the farming field as well. They haven't, in some instances, been as clever as they might.
Well, we're going to come to what we can do in the guest that comes after you, who's Ian Bell, who's Chief Executive of BAS. So I'm not going to ask you to tell people here what you think should be done necessarily. But in terms of the politics, in terms of what's happening in Westminster, what are the possible outcomes from this? Let's say we win or we lose the judicial review. What are the two outcomes there? Could anything happen in the meantime? Could the government save face in any way on this one?
Well, of course, the government can always change face because they can legislate. So even if they lost the court case, they could legislate. And I don't think they will want to go into a general election facing a shooting vote that they would hope would vote for them, but actually might well either sit on their hands or vote for somebody else. I think that's not a good situation.
Right, talking about the voters particularly, I'm from the West Country. One thing I see is less of a right-left split in my new constituency of Tiverton and Minehead. Sounds like a Ryanair airport. But in that constituency, it is now more an urban-rural split in how voter sentiment is going. Do you detect that in the Cotswolds, or are you still seeing traditional Conservatives against... What's your opposition? Is it Lib Dem or is it...
Yeah, Lib Dem.
Well, are you seeing traditional Conservatives versus traditional Lib Dems in the Cotswolds, or are you now seeing that sense of they're making laws against us because I live in the countryside versus...
What you've seen from the two by-elections, and after all, Somerton and Frome is quite a rural area, is that there are still a lot of Conservatives out there that are telling us, and we were on the doorsteps in Somerton and Frome, that you've made a mess of things, you've simply got to do better. Now, if we can do better in the next 12 months before an election, I think there's a good chance that actually that vote will return. But Rishi must realise that. He's representing a highly rural constituency in North Yorkshire. He's had the same representations as I have as chairman of the group. I know, because some of them are the same, that from his constituency, that this is not clever. So he knows, he's well in possession of the facts. He's the Prime Minister. He's in a position to do something about it if he wishes to.
Okay, so well that's in our favour then, generally speaking.
Yes.
We should see the 2019 manifesto, I'm sorry to say, was the most anti-hunting manifesto out of all of them put together, including the Greens. Yeah. And it's a tough ticket to ride on. Are you hopeful that next time round they're at least going to see sense on the countryside?
Well, I think people like me have got to make sure that we have a much greater control of the manifesto. The last manifesto was drawn up by a very small clique of people around Boris, and I think we must make sure that Rishi actually at least make sure they consult people who really know what they're talking about, whether it's in the rural field or education or health or whatever, just to make sure that those individual promises are sensible.
Right, Labour, you don't have to worry about. They're not a big thing in your constituency. I have Daniel Zeichner coming here tomorrow, who is the DEFRA shadow. The Labour Party has published the working document that's going to be their manifesto, and they have some reasonably punchy anti-trail hunting policies, trophy import ban policies. What should I be asking Daniel Zeichner?
What is his policy? What is the Labour Party policy at the next election going to be on shooting? Are they going to be supporting shooting? Because don't forget, shooting supports an enormous number of rural jobs. Enormous amount of imports into this country from people coming from abroad to shoot. This is a really big industry around about all the rural constituencies, because it's not just the shooters, it's all the people that rely on them, the hospitality, the gun makers, the feed manufacturers, the farmers. There's an awful lot of people involved in shooting, and they'll all be affected. So I think Daniel needs to be asked that question: is the Labour Party going to support shooting?
And how, I mean, you work in the same building as him, how do you expect him to answer?
Well, Daniel, to be fair, is a very bright chap. So he won't have come to an interview here with you without thinking about it very carefully. So don't let him get away with a wishy-washy answer. You want a definite yes or no. Is the Labour Party going to support shooting? Because then we can actually contrast what the Conservative Party, which will be supporting shooting, even with these difficulties that we're facing. The Conservative Party will definitely be supporting shooting, and that will be the contrast. And we want to see if that's going to be true or whether he's going to be supporting shooting.
We talk about parties being sound and people being sound on a subject, one subject or another. One thing I think you can rely on the Labour Party to be sound on is backing the one for the pot type shooter. I don't think they like the idea of commercial shooting or shooting for sport or however you want to phrase it. So something that is more than somebody going out and getting a rabbit or a pheasant for themselves. So will he try and split his answer into those two things?
Well,
So-
if he does, point out to him what I've just said. The number of other people who depend on shooting at the moment, the cartridge manufacturers, the hospitality people, people providing hotel places, providing meals, the shops that sell to those people providing those meals, the farmers. There's an awful lot of people who depend on, for their livelihood, on shooting at the moment. And he needs to be aware, if he comes out against shooting, all of those people are going to be adversely affected.
I've got one more MP coming this weekend, Greg Smith.
Yes.
What should I ask him?
Well, Greg's very much in favour of shooting, and he knows a great deal about farming and a great deal about shooting. Ask him about it. But the other thing that's going on in shooting at the moment, which I can't let this interview finish without talking about, is the consultation from the Home Office. Now, the consultation from the Home Office arose after the dreadful killing in Devon, and the coroner made some fairly vicious recommendations about shooting. Now, we worked very hard, including persuading the government that they shouldn't bring shotguns into the same category as rifles, Section 1 and Section 2. And so we have watered down, but there still is a consultation. Please, if any of you have not responded to the consultation, go to the BAFTA website, click on through. We are aiming to get well over 50,000 responses to that consultation, because that will show the government a great deal about what the shooting community thinks about all these various, and there are some important issues in there. We did very well when it was a previous consultation on air guns and supervision and so on. We need to do equally as well on this consultation. And you know, some of the things contained in that consultation are really good. We have been working for a long time to make sure that medical markers, if you're a shooter, it's on your medical marker. Now, in return for that, it's really important. The renewal dates for shotguns and firearms goes from 5 to 10 years. So the government are going to put the price up for renewing, but it's going to go from 5 to 10 years. Now, we need that reinforced in the consultation, because that would make life a lot easier and cheaper for all shooting folk.
Thank you. We had Martin Parker and Bill Harriman from BASC on here earlier. I think that actually our responses have reached 65,000 through the BASC website alone.
Fantastic.
So that works. I mean,
It does work.
The Home Office goes, my
Yes.
goodness, that's a lot of people.
Because it enables people like me to go to the Home Office and say, you cannot possibly do this. You've had 5,000 against this, but you've had 65,000 in favour. You can't really make a decision on that basis.
I must say, looking after shooting in Parliament is a full-time job. You're our unofficial Minister for Shooting. Ladies and gentlemen, Geoffrey Clifton-Brown. Thank you very much.